So let's go ahead and talk about doing these little studies. You can see I've put out my colors in more or less a rainbow: yellow, blue, red, blue, blue, red, yellow, red, yellow, and actually this one should be up there because it's an orange yellow, and then yellow, and then if we had it, it would be, this is red, yellow, yellow with a little bit of red in it, and then we do a green, yellow. We don't need that, as we said. So anyway, that's my orientation, and then I put out two pots of two little dabs, or big dabs. They're good size, you know, they're big compared to my thumb. And that way, if I get dirty in one, I can go over to the clean one. And I got this gets all blue and gray or something. I come over and get this for my nice rich yellows. So what I'm looking for now as an outdoor painter is a sense of the warm and the cool. That's going to be much more apparent and a much stronger effect than in the brown school. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So notice as soon as I add white, it grays. And what we're going to try and do here is make sure our colors relate, which is going to be hard, because since we're dealing with a blue doesn't have anything to do with an orange, or a yellow, or a red for that matter. And so they're not going to harmonize because they don't have anything in common. They might have value in common. We're going to leave that aside because the tonal composition would have been set at this point, and we already said that value is not a very valuable way to harmonize things. So I'm going to want that blue to move towards the reds, and so I can use a blue-red, control the value, and make a blue-red. Bring it over this way. Bring it over a little bit more, over this way. The fact that I added white already grayed it out. So now that blue-red is there. And then I'm going to take my orange, get the value of that I want for my light side. Now the orange doesn't have anything to do with the blue, but the orange is a yellow-red and has a little bit of red in it. So now we've got this, and it didn't gray down much because it was a stain. And notice I did a lousy job of cleaning my brush. So now that yellow-red, that orange, is slightly blue-purple. You got grayer. And that makes them pretty close together. Now, if I wanted them to be more close together, I would add some red, and I'd use not just a red. If I wanted them to harmonize much more beautifully, I'd use exactly the red that I used to warm up the blue. And so maybe I'll even use the red that already has a little bit of the blue in that. Control the value of that. And put a little or a lot of that in there. Now look how close those colors get. And I can make them closer yet. And now they get along very, very well. So let's start with that. And let me make a bigger version of this, a bigger pile of it. And that's going to be the greatest skill you need to develop, is being able to mix a color and then remix it and get exactly, or close enough to exactly, the color again. And let's push that a little bit farther. Towards my reds. All right, so now I'm going to say that this is my figure. And this is the shadow of the figure. I'm going to thin that out so I don't have to mix as much. There's the head of my figure. There's a shadow on the figure. Let's clean that up a little bit. Like so. And, oops, let me use a different brush here. Here is the relatively gray background. Look at a gray red. There's my foreground, background, light and shadow relationships. And that'll work fairly well. Good chance it won't work really well, but it'll be in the ballpark. And let's say that we have the dark hair here, maybe a dark something in the environment here. And so there's my composition. It's going to work pretty well. And so once I get that idea, I can say, okay, that's it. I love it. Now we'll make a big old version of that, and I'll mix these colors up in a big pots of the 3 or 4 colors that belong to that composition, or the 7 or 8 colors that belong to that composition. They're all harmonizing. They all have something to do with each other, or they're so darn dark you can't tell that they're not harmonizing. And then you can say, well, you know, when I look at this, they all have red in them. It's a blue-red, a violet. It's a, let's put this in here, a dark gray-red for the background. That's a little more intense than our blue-violet. And then we have that nice orange there. And so everything's got red, so maybe I'm going to do another one now. Or I'm lucky enough to be out on the beach and I observe that the light's changed, or that I can be more accurate to the light. Now let's do another one. Now let's take this and this, and I'm going to try and get a little more intensity. Well, maybe not, but I'll try it this way. I'm going to lay in that figure now, and I'm going to try and key it to orange, the whole thing to orange. They all had red in them. I'm going to try making it all a little affected by orange, as I said, and a little bit more obvious. So I'm going to use, in this case, I'm going to use a stain. It's actually quicker to do that. I'd take up less of my precious palette space, because we're on our palette cam, so we're really limited in space. You can see how little my palette is. That's always a problem, to have a small palette. You want a big area to mix lots of colors. So once again, I'm already setting up the excuses for myself before I paint things that don't work out. That way, if I do, I can say it's not a lack of talent. It's somebody else's fault. They didn't give me a good set of materials. Either way is fine. That's probably a better way to go, so we don't have that hand crossing over. We're trying to be inventive so we can get as tight as possible and still give me room to work. Yeah. I don't have as good an excuse now, though, if you when you do that, when I screw it up, but that's okay. All right, so there we are now. And now I'm going to take that same red-violet, and I'm going to make it an orange-red-violet. And I'll take that same red background and make that slightly oranger too. And maybe make the shadow and the light the shadow of the flash and the background a little closer in value, or a lot closer in value. And now I'll make an orange version of that same dark color that we had. And there we have there. Now everything is keying. Key is in a key lock. Keying, so hard to say that word, to orange. And by definition, it will harmonize more, because everything has not only some orange, it has a tremendous amount of orange. These are all variations of orange. It's like having a Mediterranean cuisine. It's one type of food, one culture of food that everything is based off of. And so we're going to get things going together beautifully, because they can't help it. They have to go together. And then we can play with variations of that. And notice when I start working out these color issues, these fundamental, what are the color harmonies, I allow the drawing to go away. This is not, there's no pretense hardly that this is a figure. It's just a vertical set of zigzags. That's a much better way to go, in my opinion, because then I can worry about the beautiful colors and not worry about the beautiful drawing. Like so. So then I can play with that all day long, and I could say, well, let's do a gradation. I'm going to take my orange background and make it a little darker here. And here. And do a gradation. And then I'm going to make it lighter. Notice it looks different here. Actually, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to make it darker here on this side too. We'll just push it down there. And maybe it's really dark up here. So the face pops out, but the hair gets more lost. And then it gets lighter down here. So those legs in shadow stand out a little bit less well. Okay. And then we could take that and do all sorts of crazy variations. Now I could bring in a strain of cool. Since I'm in the oranges, I'm going to take not a blue, because that'll be a right off the complementary. They won't have much in common other than graying them out. So I'm not going to do complements. I'm going to do near complements. I'm going to make sure that the orange is a little yellow, and it is slightly yellow. I'll make it a little bit more. And I'm going to make the blue go to a blue-green, and then I'll gray that out. So now I'm going to make a blue-green. And I'm just saying, what if? And I can look to my color wheel to say, well, that gets me closer now. So those might look good together. And if I gray them and gray them and gray them, it might be just right. Or it might be not so good, and I'll do another little study. So ideally, I'd take this, I'd do it again. I'm not going to do that. And then I'm going to take my turquoise idea. And I'm going to make it the same value as this. And now I'm going to say, what would happen if I make the my gray-orange right in here. I guess it was an oranger version of that. Do that. I'm going to take my gray-orange that we moved over maybe here now, and I'm going to relate that over to here. And notice how by keeping, I made it a little lighter so you could see it on camera nicely, but by keeping it, let's knock it down a notch here, keeping it the same value. Even the same value, it sits in there pretty well. It's in the gray range. And notice when you look at these, other than the really dark color, we're all in the pastels. It's all pastels. They're quite intense pastels at times, but they're all in the pastels. And the thing with pastels is, or are, is that pastels can be a rainbow of colors, of course, so you could have any temperature. So you're going to have blues and oranges and such potentially. So it won't necessarily harmonize around temperature, but you're going to add white to them. So when you add white, that's what a pastel is. These are really bright colors, every one of them. And these have a little bit of white with them, but when you add a lot of white to them, they gray out. White is a very light gray. So now you've taken your color wheel that's out here and you've moved it in tighter. I don't want to get my, well, I'll just do it. You moved in along in this inner circle of grayness. And white is a cool gray. And so it's, you've added a little bit of blue to all of them too. And so they're all relating in that cooler and especially grayer, with that kind of grayer sympathy, and they get along. They're going to have something to do with each other. And then we can move them over, like I said, we can make them a little yellower in one area and make the red a little yellower, and we can make the green a little yellower, and then they'll have yellow in common also.
Well, the great thing about MMA is that each teacher brings something that adds to how you approach the art. I especially love Steve Huston. His is very ordered and structured and very repeatable. That's what's really exciting about his courses is he produces gorgeous stuff, but he shows you exactly how to build up to that.
Okay, so anyway, we can add gradations there and make shifts and see how that might work. And it might be a radical change. This is much more of an expressionist change. There's a lovely movement that was around, I think in the 70s. It was the San Francisco abstract figurative movement. The guy I like the best of that, and I like him a lot, he had a short period of this and then he moved on to other things that I don't like as much. Nathan Oliveira. And he would do these, what they tried to do is take the graceful gesture, more or less. They stiffened it and stuff, but take the gesture, the beautiful gesture of classical Greek and Roman work, and put that into abstract expressionism or figurative expressionism, like a Diebenkorn would, and try and take the best of both. And they'd work oftentimes big, but not always. Olivera would oftentimes, and with house paint even. But they would do these things that weren't so much different than this. So you get kind of the fluid figurative gesture, but really abstracted modern graphic shapes, and then big gradations and big, as it oftentimes in the early 20th century, mid 20th century, you would get using just everyday objects rather than the privileged everyday mediums, rather than the privileged mediums of the art set, oil paint and casein and egg tempera, that kind of stuff. You'd use acrylic house paint, and you'd use newspapers as collage, that kind of found object stuff that Picasso made popular. So anyway, you can see how far it's taken, this idea is taken, where you get a finish that's not much different than this comp, in effect, but it's still playing with those same energies. Now let's go back real quick, and then let me see the time here. We're right at 1, so let me just take about 5-10 minutes and go back to our Brown School painters. In Brown School, we said it was mainly the value, the tonal composition that held it. But what did they do? Let me switch brushes here. In effect and for effect, they took their light side and they made it very, very light with the color of the light plus the color of the object being the color they mixed. And they used really limited colors. They weren't the bright out of the tube colors. They were dirtier colors. So they didn't have the full range of color. They weren't invented for the most part. A lot of them weren't. And the color theory wasn't completely understood at that point. But they had great eyes for observation. They could see it. And so this would be the lightest half tone up into the highlights. And then when they went down into the shadows, they took the pink flesh, they were painting Europeans for the most part, the pink flesh, the gray pink, and they took it down into the dark area. And they took that orange, really, because it was the pink with the yellow. They took it down into the brown area, and a brown is just a really dirty orange. And they'd be in here. And then they understood that for anything to look like flesh, you need to bring blood into it. And so they'd bring in the reds. Sometimes the red lips, like in the Zorns, but definitely the ruddy cheeks. They'd bring in the red to it. So look at what they've done. They've taken the color wheel and they moved way inside, just like the Impressionists do, into that pastel range, more or less. But it's way inside. Everything's gray except for that darker halftone. And everything is actually keyed around the orange palette in here. Actually yellow to yellow-red in here. It was all in this range, in that fiery range. So they've made all the colors harmonize around the orange, which is a tonalist idea we think of, where everything's green, everything's blue because it's a Whistler nocturne, it's green because it's a doing figures in the landscape. And they've grayed things towards the center as well as letting them move a little bit out to the edge. So they have a range of intensities, although it's a much grayer range than the Impressionists or the Expressionists. It's a tight range of temperature, so they're not dealing with that cool idea for the most part, but they are showing relative coolness. They'll have a cool blue-white highlight, for example, because the white paint is cool. Or they'll have the blue beard on the male's chin. And notice when we do then depart into cool, it's very, very gray. It's controlled in value. It's very much in the same value as the lighter and middle halftones. And then when we finally get a pop of color, it's attached to the same value, just a grayer version. Now we've brought in that nice red energy, that red life force of the ruddy cheeks. But it's the same value as the darker, as the shadow basically, or very, very close to it. And so we're controlling the temperatures, we're controlling the intensity, we're dealing with relative warm and cools exactly like we are in the Impressionists. It's just the Impressionists is keyed it up. And for the most part, they've taken out the real darks so that we can see the rich intensity and the subtle play of temperature. Here we're in the grays, so it's harder to feel and see and understand those shifting temperatures, but they're still there. We still have orange and yellow and blue throughout, just like we would in an Impressionist. But they're a subtler, fuller realization at an Impressionist. And the value range is keyed way up to the extreme relative, whereas the Impressionists, that those value range, except for maybe yellows, are kept in the mid-range. So they're just taking our temperature, intensity, and values and playing the scales a little bit. If it's indoor, it's more value. It's a little less temperature, and it's very carefully controlled intensities, mainly in the grays, except for those spots of ruddy cheek, or if we're going to key it to yellow because we're Rembrandt, we're going to show that golden God light coming down to enlighten our poor flesh, poor rotting flesh. If you're and then in the Impressionists, the outdoor painters, we come down into the mid-range with a yellow popping up there, but in kind of the middle, upper half, as opposed to the full range, we're here. And then our temperatures are more or less the same, but we have a fuller realization. We'll bring in greens and purples, which won't often happen in a brown school unless it's the purple royal robe of the king to show kinghood, that kind of thing. But they stay more in the primaries colors. In the brown school, we get a lot more secondaries in the Impressionist and Expressionist areas. And then, but the temperatures are more or less the same, warm to cool. And then the intensities are keyed way up. We don't have as many grays. And notice when we don't have as many grays, unless we key them to a tight area, in this case we did exactly what an Impressionist would, we stayed in the oranges. If we start going wild swings of strong warms and strong cools, we need to gray them down much more, or else they're not going to work. And when we do gray them down, say the cool shadows for the Impressionist figure, it's going to feel a little alien or a little garish or a little too sweet if we don't come back into those and bring back the warm flesh. So if I can take those shadows and bring in some of that golden warmth of the suntan or that ruddy red of the flushed features, then we're going to have trouble. It's going to feel alien. So what we'll do, no matter how far we take the colors, bring in some of the red, because that's when we spill our blood, it's red, it's not blue. So red becomes a symbol of life. They didn't use blue blood for the symbol of the passion in Christianity. They used the red. That's even though blue blood's credible, red is more iconic. So use that red blood to come in. So I can make it a blue Martian, a green lizard man, a purple alien, whatever it is. And if I bring in some of that warm, ruddy color, it's going to feel like it's flesh. So that'll bring it back into realism, even if you take wild departures in temperature or wild liberties with intensities.